The wedding venue looked like something out of a dream. Soft golden lights filled the room, flowers were perfectly arranged on every table, and a gentle music played in the background that made everything feel magical. Guests were smiling, cameras were ready, and every detail was just perfect. Backstage, Zola stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath. Her dress flowed beautifully around her, and for a moment, she just looked at herself. This was really happening. Her big day. The day she had imagined so many times. Then she turned, and saw her father. Alyamide stood there quietly, already dressed and waiting. The moment their eyes met, his face softened with pride. Not the loud kind, just a deep, emotional kind that said everything without words. Zola's eyes instantly filled with tears. "You look beautiful," he said gently. Zola smiled, trying not to cry. "Because of you," she replied. He stepped closer and held out his arm. There was something so strong and comforting in that simple gesture. This wasn't just a walk down the aisle. It was years of love, sacrifice, and silent support coming together in one moment. As the doors slowly opened and the music grew louder, Zola placed her hand on his arm. Her heart was racing, but she felt safe. With every step they took together, the room faded away. It was just her, and her father. And for that moment, everything felt exactly the way it should be. The reception started with laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. Everything still looked beautiful. Guests were enjoying the food, taking pictures, and congratulating Zola and her husband. On the surface, it all felt like a perfect continuation of the wedding. But slowly, something began to feel off. Zola was standing near one of the tables when she first heard it. Quiet voice. Almost a whisper. Very simple setup. I expected something more. She turned slightly and saw a few members of her husband's family sitting together, smiling, but not the warm kind of smile. The kind that hides judgment. Another voice followed, a little louder this time. Well, you know her background. They did what they could. Soft laugh. Yeah, humble people. The words weren't shouted. They weren't meant to cause a scene, but they were sharp enough to cut deep. Zola felt it instantly. For a second, her smile faded. Her chest tightened just a little. She glanced across the room, her eyes searching for her father. He was talking to some guests, still smiling, still being polite like always. He hadn't heard them. Or maybe he had, and just chose to ignore it. Zola forced herself to look away. She picked up her glass, took a small sip, and tried to act like everything was fine. This was her wedding day. She didn't want drama. She didn't want tension. Maybe I'm overthinking, she told herself quietly. But then it didn't stop. As she moved from table to table, greeting guests, the same tone followed her. Oh, the decorations are nice. Very modest. They kept it small, I see. I guess not everyone can afford something grand. Each comment came with a smile. Each sentence wrapped in fake politeness. But the meaning underneath was clear. They were judging, not just the wedding but her family. Zola kept smiling through it all. She nodded, thanked guests, and played her part perfectly. On the outside she looked calm, happy, unbothered. But inside something was slowly building. Not anger yet, just a quiet discomfort. A feeling that something wasn't right. And somewhere deep down she knew, this was only the beginning. The music was still playing, and the room was full of soft chatter. But the energy had started to shift. Zola could feel it. Those small comments from earlier hadn't stopped. They had just been waiting for the right moment to get louder. And then, it happened. Abina, her mother-in-law, stood up from her seat with a glass in her hand. First, it looked like a normal speech. Guests turned their heads, smiling, expecting something sweet or welcoming. Zola forced a smile too. But the moment Abina started speaking, something in her tone felt off. I just want to say, she began, her voice loud and clear across the room. We are very happy to welcome Zola into our family. Few polite claps. Then she paused, and smiled in a way that didn't feel kind. But let's be honest, she continued. We had to do a lot to make this wedding happen properly. The room grew quieter. Zola's fingers tightened around her glass. Abina glanced around, as if enjoying the attention. I mean, her side did what they could, she added casually. But your father couldn't even contribute properly. The words landed like a slap. Silence. Complete, heavy silence. Some guests looked down at their plates. Others exchanged awkward glances. No one laughed this time. No one reacted. It was too much. Zola felt her heart drop. For a second she couldn't even move. It was like everything around her froze. Slowly, her eyes turned toward her father. Alyamide was standing near the edge of the room. His posture was still straight, his face calm. And then he smiled. A small, quiet smile. The kind that tries to hide pain. He nodded politely, as if nothing had happened. As if those words hadn't just humiliated him in front of everyone. But Zola saw it. She saw the slight tension in his jaw. The way his eyes didn't shine the same anymore. The way he avoided looking directly at anyone. He was hurt. And he was trying so hard not to show it. That hurt Zola even more than the words themselves. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, and for the first time that day, her smile completely disappeared. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was humiliation. And it had been done to the one person who had always protected her, always stood by her, without ever asking for anything in return. In that moment, something inside Zola shifted. Completely. For a few seconds, Zola couldn't hear anything. The music faded. The voices disappeared. It was like the whole room went silent, even though people were still there, still watching. All she could see was her father. Alyamide was still standing in the same place, still holding that small, polite smile. But now, Zola noticed the details she almost missed before. His eyes didn't meet anyone's. His shoulders just slightly lowered. The way his fingers tightened around his glass for a second, then relaxed like he was reminding himself to stay calm. He was trying to be strong. For her. And that's what broke something inside Zola. Memories rushed into her mind all at once. Every late night he worked. Every sacrifice he never talked about. Every time he chose her happiness over his own comfort. He had always stood quietly in the background, making sure she had everything she needed. And today, on the biggest day of her life, he was being disrespected. Publicly. Loudly. Like his efforts meant nothing. Zola's breathing slowed. Her eyes didn't leave his face. That smile he was forcing, it wasn't pride anymore. It was pain. And in that exact moment, something inside her changed. Completely. The soft, patient Zola. The one who ignored the whispers, who kept smiling through the subtle insults. That version of her disappeared. Her expression became still. But not the same calm as before. This was different. This was controlled. Her grip on her dress tightened slightly as she straightened her posture. The tears in her eyes didn't fall. They disappeared, replaced by something stronger. Clarity. Respect wasn't something you beg for. And it definitely wasn't something you let people destroy, especially not when it comes to the person who gave you everything. Zola took a slow breath. Her gaze moved away from her father, and toward the front of the room, where everyone was still sitting in that heavy silence. They thought this moment would pass. They thought she would stay quiet. They thought wrong. Without saying a word, Zola made her decision. This ends here. Not tomorrow. Not later. Right now. And the calm look on her face. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was the warning before everything changes. As Zola stood there, her heart still heavy from what just happened, her mind drifted back to things no one in that room knew. Things her father never talked about. Flashbacks started playing in her head, one after another. She remembered the late-night phone calls. The quiet conversations he would take outside, always saying, "It's nothing, don't worry." She remembered the way he would check his phone and then smile at her, like everything was under control, even when it clearly wasn't. At the time, she didn't question it. But now, it all made sense. Weeks before the wedding, when things suddenly became easier, when the venue got upgraded, when the decorations became more elegant, when extra guests were somehow accommodated without stress, Zola had thought it was her fiancé's family stepping up. That's what everyone believed. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. But the truth was different. Zola remembered the day she accidentally saw a message on her father's phone. Payment confirmation. A large amount. Way more than she expected. When she asked him about it, he just smiled gently and said, "Just handling a few things. Focus on your day." She didn't push further. Now she wished she had, because piece by piece, the truth became clear in her mind. Her father had been quietly paying for things, covering the gaps, fixing the problems before they could even reach her, from the catering upgrades to the venue balance, even the last-minute changes that everyone praised the groom's family for. It wasn't them. It was him. Williamite. And he never once asked for recognition. Not a single time did he step forward to say, "I did this." He let others take the credit, just so Zola could enjoy her wedding without stress, without tension, without feeling like she owed anyone anything. That's who he was. Quiet, selfless, strong in a way that didn't need attention. And now, the same man was being reduced to someone who couldn't contribute. Zola's chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't confusion or hurt. It was something deeper. Because the truth wasn't just hidden, had been ignored, and the people speaking the loudest in that room had no idea who they were really talking about. The room was still carrying that heavy silence when Zola finally moved. Slowly, she placed her glass down and adjusted her dress. Her face looked calm again, almost too calm, the kind of calm that makes people unsure of what's coming next. Without rushing, she started walking toward the stage. A few guests noticed first. Then more heads turned. The soft music continued in the background, but the attention in the room began to shift toward her. Zola picked up the microphone. For a second, she didn't say anything. She just looked around the room, at the guests, at the tables, at the faces that had been smiling just minutes ago. Some looked curious, some looked nervous, and some, especially her husband's family, looked completely unbothered. They thought this was normal. They thought this would pass. Zola smiled. Soft, controlled smile. Not the excited bride smile from earlier. This one was quieter, sharper. Most people relaxed when they saw it. "Oh, she's just going to give a thank you speech," someone whispered. "Yeah, probably just emotional," another added. That's what everyone expected. Zola lifted the mic closer to her lips and took a small breath. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. Her voice was steady, clear, normal. A few guests nodded, settling into their seats again. Some even smiled, thinking the moment had passed. But then, there was a pause. Small one, just enough to feel different. Zola's eyes moved slowly across the room again. This time they didn't carry warmth, they carried something else. Awareness. Her fingers tightened slightly around the microphone, but her posture stayed straight, confident. "I really appreciate everyone who came to celebrate with us," she continued. Still calm, still polite. But now, there was a shift in her tone. Subtle, but noticeable. The kind of tone that makes people stop and listen a little more carefully. Her husband glanced at her, a bit confused. This didn't feel like the usual speech. This didn't feel rehearsed. Even the whispers in the room started to fade. Zola wasn't rushing her words. She wasn't emotional in the way people expected. She was controlled, deliberate, and that made it even more powerful. For a moment, she looked toward her father. Just one look, and that was enough. When she turned back to the crowd, her decision was already written on her face. This wasn't just a thank you speech. This was something else. Something no one in that room was ready for. Zola held the microphone a little tighter, her calm expression never breaking. The room had gone completely quiet now. Every eye was on her. She took a small breath. "Before we continue," she said slowly, her voice steady but firm, "I want to clarify something." That one sentence changed the entire atmosphere. People straightened in their seats. Some exchanged quick glances. Her husband looked at her, confused now. Even Abina's confident expression faded just a little. Zola paused. Not because she was unsure, but because she wanted every single word to land. "I've been hearing a lot of comments today," she continued, her eyes moving across the room, "about who did what and who didn't." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Zola's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. If anything, it became calmer. "And I think it's only fair," she added softly, "that the truth is known." You could feel the tension now. It wasn't loud. It was heavy. Zola turned slightly and looked toward her father again. Alyamide stood frozen, almost as if he already knew what she was about to do. He gave a small shake of his head, like he didn't want attention. But this time, Zola didn't look away. "This wedding," she said, turning back to the crowd. "The venue, the food, the decorations, the upgrades everyone has been praising." He paused. Then she finished the sentence. "Were paid for by my father." Silence. Not the normal kind. The kind that feels like the air has been pulled out of the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Zola continued, her voice still calm but now carrying a quiet strength. "He covered the major costs. Quietly. Without telling anyone. Without asking for recognition. And without making anyone feel uncomfortable." Her words were simple, but they hit hard. Some guests slowly turned their heads toward Alyamide. Others looked down, clearly uncomfortable. A few people whispered, but even those whispers felt too loud in that moment. Zola didn't stop. In fact, she added, many of the things that were being credited to others were actually handled by him. Her eyes didn't leave the crowd. No anger, no shouting, just truth, raw and undeniable. Abina's face had completely changed now. The confidence was gone. The smile was gone. She looked caught. Zola lowered the mic just slightly, then brought it back up. "I just thought," she said gently, "it was important to give credit where it's actually due." Another silence followed, but this time it was different. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy with realization, because in just a few calm sentences, Zola had flipped the entire room. For a few seconds after Zola finished speaking, no one said anything. It was like the entire room had frozen. Then slowly, the reaction started. Whispers. Quiet at first, but spreading fast from table to table. "Wait, her father paid for it. Everything." Then why were they saying? People didn't even finish their sentences. They just looked at each other, confused, embarrassed, some even ashamed. All eyes began to shift toward Abina. Just minutes ago, she had been sitting confidently, speaking loudly, judging without hesitation. But now, her face had completely changed. The smile was gone. Her posture stiffened. Her eyes moved quickly around the room, noticing the way people were now looking at her. Not with respect anymore, but with questions, with doubt. For the first time that evening, she didn't have anything to say. Zola's husband stood still, almost like he couldn't process what he had just heard. His eyes moved from Zola to his mother, then across the room. "Is this true?" he asked quietly, more to himself than anyone else. But no one answered him, because the answer was already clear. Across the room, Alyamide still stood in the same place. But now the way people looked at him was completely different. The same man they had overlooked was now the one everyone was noticing. Respect had quietly returned to him, without him asking for it. Some guests nodded slowly, as if everything was finally making sense. Others looked uncomfortable, realizing they had believed the wrong story. And the energy in the room, it had completely flipped. The people who were whispering before were now silent. The ones who had been silent were now watching closely. Zola didn't move from the stage. She didn't need to say anything more. Her calm presence alone was enough, because the truth had done its job perfectly. No shouting, no arguments, just a few honest words. And everything changed. Power shifted, respect shifted. And in that moment, everyone in that room understood one thing very clearly. They had judged the wrong person. And now, they had no way to take it back. Zola took a slow, steady breath and lifted the microphone one last time. The room was completely still. Every eye was on her now. Every guest, every whispering table, even her husband and his mother, frozen in disbelief. She smiled softly, calm and controlled. There was no anger in her voice. No need for shouting, no need for drama. Just the quiet power of truth. "Respect isn't bought," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the room. But today, it was clearly misplaced. Her words landed like a gentle blow, soft but undeniable. People didn't know whether to look away or face the reality she was pointing out. A few mouths opened and closed silently. Some guests exchanged glances, realizing the truth for the first time. Even the servers paused, carrying trays mid-step, sensing the shift in the air. Zola's husband looked at her, stunned, as if he were finally seeing her fully. Strong, confident, unshakable. Abina's lips pressed into a tight line. Her earlier arrogance had crumbled into something fragile and exposed. She wanted to respond, to argue, to take control, but she couldn't. Nothing could undo what Zola had just revealed. Zola didn't rush or yell. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. Every step she had taken that day, every smile she had forced through earlier whispers, had led to this moment. And now, with a single composed statement, she had flipped the entire room. She glanced toward her father. Alyamid's eyes glistened, but this time not with hurt, with pride. A small, soft smile curved his lips, the kind that spoke volumes without words. He had never sought recognition, never demanded it, but Zola had given it in the most powerful way possible, openly, calmly, undeniably. The room stayed quiet, heavy with realization. Every whisper had stopped. Every judgment had been exposed. Zola lowered the microphone slowly, her calm smile unwavering. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama. It was about dignity. And in that dignity, she had spoken louder than anyone could ever shout. For the first time that evening, the energy shifted completely. The tables, the guests, the family who had tried to belittle her, they all understood something they hadn't before. Zola had reminded them that respect isn't something you can fake. It isn't something you can claim by status or arrogance. It's something earned. And today they had shown exactly who hadn't earned it. Zola turned from the crowd and walked toward her father. She reached out and took his hand gently. It was warm, steady, and full of the quiet strength she had always admired. For a moment they just stood like that, holding on to each other, letting the tension of the room settle around them. Together they stepped off the stage. The music started again, soft and flowing, and the guests began to clap, not the awkward, polite claps from before, but sincere ones. The energy in the room had shifted. The wedding could continue, yes, but now it carried a new sense of respect. A respect that hadn't been there earlier. As they moved to the side, Zola and her father stood quietly together, watching the celebration unfold. Her heart felt lighter than it had all day. She didn't need to say anything else. She didn't need to justify or explain. The truth had spoken for them. Alyamid gave her a small, soft smile, the kind that held pride, love, and relief all at once. Zola returned the smile, feeling the weight of the moment, the culmination of years of support, sacrifices, and unspoken care finally recognized, quietly but powerfully. Guests continued to dance, laugh, and celebrate, but now the whispers had changed. Instead of judgment, there was curiosity, admiration, and a subtle acknowledgement that the story wasn't what they had assumed. Even her husband looked thoughtful, realizing perhaps for the first time the depth of her father's generosity and dignity. Zola squeezed her father's hand gently. There was no need for grand gestures, no need for confrontation. The truth had been enough, and in that quiet, unassuming victory, she felt something rare, complete satisfaction and peace. She looked around the room one last time, her gaze steady and soft, and with that small, confident smile she whispered, not to anyone but to herself and her father. They thought they were judging his worth, but they only exposed their own. In that moment, the wedding wasn't just a celebration of a marriage. It was a celebration of honesty, dignity, and the quiet strength of the man who had given everything without ever asking for anything in return. And Zola knew this was a day neither she nor her father would ever forget.